All right, guys, in the last video, we finished up all the player dynamics that so we can have actual combat. Players can fire at each other and take damage, and run out of mana and run out of health, and we even triggered a die little script so that it acknowledges when one player has hit 0 life. I promised that this time we would finish up the game doing some scene management and moving from level to level from our opening screen, but I think we're gonna not do that yet. We're gonna create a mana bottle this time. I would like a way, if everybody just shoots their fireballs into the ether and nobody has won, there's got to be a way to win. So I think that the way that we're going to do this is by adding some mana bottles so people can go and get some more magic power to get more fireballs. We have to have a winner. Otherwise, what's the point of the game? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a mana bottle real quick, just the shape of one. So I'm going to start with, I already have in mind kind of what I want this to look like. So I'm going to create a sphere here. And I'm going to sort of, let's change the Y scale. Let's change all the scales. I'm going to make it like 0.7 and 0.7, and I'm going to make it like 0.5, just kind of squat looking. And I set it on the floor like so. See. So that looks about like what I want. You'll see what I'm doing here. You can make your mana bottle look however you want. So it doesn't really matter. To that sphere, I'm going to name it mana bottle. You guys already know how to model things here. So I'm going to add to this let's add a cylinder. And we'll make that 0.5 high and like 0.1 in the other dimensions. It looks a little too small. 0.2 maybe. I'll buy that. Okay, and one more sphere. So let's have... And just pull that guy up a little bit, and I want him to be sort of 0.3 maybe, and squash him down to 0.1. So we just have kind of the lip of the bottle here that sits right on the top. Okay, that so it's supposed to, in the way I designed it, in my mind, it's supposed to look sort of like a little chemistry beaker boiler thing. So the shape of that is fine. I'm completely cool with that. Let's color it. So I'm going to go into my materials, and you know what? This nose color seems just fine. I wanted to make this blue anyway, so let's just drop some blue on that. Get all 3 little portions. Okay, so there's my mana bottle. I have the main base of it is that big fat squashed gourd shape right there, and everything else is the cylinder and the sphere attached to it, and that is it for the actual shape. Now we have to make it do something. So I'm going to the mana bottle, and over here in the inspector, I'm going to add a component. I'm going to create a new script. I could just as easily create the script by right-clicking down here and creating a C# script, but I want you guys to see that you can do that, create it directly connected already to a game object. So I'm going over here to the inspector, and I'm going to add a component. And let's see, this is going off the bottom a little bit, so let's just bring this up. So when I add script, I'm going to come all the way to the bottom and say a new script, and I'm going to call this script mana bottle. Done. So my mana bottle script is created over here in the project tab, and it's already attached to my mana bottle game object. So let's open that. What I want this thing to do is interact with my player when my player makes contact with it in the exact same way that my fireball interacts with the character, when it makes contact with the character. So in one case, the fireball is moving and it makes contact with the character. And in this case of the mana bottle is just going to be sitting there, and the character is going to move and make contact with the mana bottle. It doesn't matter. They each they're two colliders are touching, and that's the exact same thing. It doesn't matter which one's moving and making contact with the other. So rather than reinventing the wheel here, I'm just going to go back to my fireball script, and I'm going to grab this whole on trigger enter business. So that entire thing, I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to go over to mana bottle, and underneath my update function, you know, before I do this, I'm going to clean up this code. Press these down, align, because ew. Now, underneath my update function, I'll put in my on trigger enter. We might want this trigger counter thing, so I'm just going to leave that there. So I may as well make int trigger counter equals 0. Did I spell it right? Counter. There we go. So, if we already have this built in, if the thing that bumps into it is something on layer 9 or on layer 10, then good, that's a player. And so we're going to grab the, let's not call this one enemy stats, shall we? Let's call it player. I guess so. Yeah. So in this case, we have capital player stats is the name of this script over here that's going to be attached to the player that bumps into our mana bottle. And lowercase p player stats is going to be the variable that can hold a player stats script, a reference to it. So rather than called enemy stats, it's going to be called player stats. And player stats. We don't want to, let's see, player stats. We don't want to do take damage. And let's see, let's do this. Rather than getting to a, rather than just getting to a function that's in the player stats, let's this time, let's manipulate the variable directly, the current, the string stamina mana.y. If we go over to player stats, we have our strength stamina mana. We've already made that public. If it's not public on yours, go ahead and make it public right now. So string stamina mana, you would need it to be public for the fireballs to work. So here we go. We're going to have player stats dot strength. Let's see. We're getting the player stats, and the player stats dot strength stamina mana is going to be equal to new vector 3, right? And that's, of course, going to be strength. This is wrong. I tried to write strength stamina mana, but I can't because there is no strength stamina mana variable in here. Instead, I have to say player stats dot strength stamina mana. I'm just going to copy that from there. So I'm going to copy that. My first number in the variable 3 is going to be paste. Player stats dot strength stamina mana dot x, right? Next is going to be, so colon space, player stats dot strength stamina mana dot y, and then paste player stats dot strength stamina mana dot z, and plus, oh, how much should a mana bottle give you? 50 plus 50. So this will add, this will add 50 to whatever our mana amount is. Now, we also don't want to, that this will destroy the game object, the mana bottle. we don't want this else on here because we don't want the mana bottle to go away if something random hits it. If you hit it with a fireball, we don't want it to go away because we'd like to pick up that mana. So we want it to ignore everything that touches it except for a player. So I'm going to delete that. And so it's adding 50 mana to us. But what if we have 90 mana and we pick this thing up and that it tries to add 50 to that? Well, that would give us 140 mana because 90 plus the 50 from the mana bottle gives us 140. But we can't have 140. That doesn't work. 100 is our maximum. So what we need to do now is just double check. So if parentheses and brackets. Notice I'm nesting this if statement inside my if statement inside my if statement. You can end up with a lot of these depending on what you're trying to do. So if player stats dot strength lowercase s stamina mana dot z, if that is greater than 100, then let's just grab this because we're gonna be setting this to. We already have a line of code that saves a new value into string stamina mana. So let's just say player stats dot string stamina mana is equal to. We don't want this to be based. We don't want it to be based on what string stamina mana is at the moment. If it's above 100, it should stop at 100. 100 is going to be our last number. So this is the first time we're actually just putting a number in with no math involved. Doesn't have to be based on anything. So player stats at string stamina mana. Yes. I think that's everything. So when we bump into this mana bottle, it should destroy itself and give us 50 mana. So let's save that. Go back over to Unity. And there's our mana bottle sitting there. I'm going to hit play. All right, so let's take our guy and we'll shoot some fireballs off into the distance here and waste all of our mana. And now when we go over the fireball, or I'm sorry, go over the mana bottle, well, we ran into it and it didn't let us pick it up. What is going on with that? Anybody have a guess? Let me show you why. So take us out of play mode. The reason is because here we have our mana bottle, and if we look at the collider, look at the collider, it's not set to be a trigger. And in our code, because this came off of the fireball, we have on trigger enter. So that's different. If this is set to be a trigger, then we need on trigger enter. If this is not set to be a trigger, then we don't call it trigger. We don't use that language. We use the language collider. So since it's not a trigger, it's a collider properly. So instead of saying on trigger enter, we would say on collision enter. So in this case, we actually do want the mana bottle to be a trigger, though. We don't want it to collide with it. We just want to pick it up as we run across. So I'm actually going to take all of these and make them triggers. Now, only the mana bottle game object, the big gourd at the bottom, only that one has the mana bottle script on it. So the little pipe coming up out of the top here doesn't have that script. I'm going to make it a trigger, and the little sphere lip at the top is a trigger now. So those are not going to give us mana. Only bumping into the big base is going to give us. And so now it is a trigger, and that ought to do it. Let's try this again. So player number 2 is going to fire waste a bunch of mana. And now let's run through the mana bottle, and it gives us a bunch of mana. And if we turn around, it's gone. That works exactly as expected. Okay, one last thing for mana bottles. What we want to do now is take our mana bottle and drag it out of the hierarchy into the project tab to make a prefab of it. Now we can take our mana bottle prefab and drop as many of them as we want into the game scene. It's a little low. Let's pull that up so it looks like it's sitting on the ground. So yeah, we can put a bunch of mana bottles here. And that is, the way that I've built my original game here is I had kind of an extensive maze, and if you wanted the mana bottles, you had to like go into the maze to find them. You could just spread them around the level. You could just put them everywhere. I don't know. Make it interesting. Try and figure out how to use the mana bottles in your game in a way that makes it more fun to play. So I'm just gonna waste all my mana here. Let's see if I can pick up one mana bottle. There are 2 left. Blast, 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 blast. Get another one. I missed. I'm trying not to pick up both. There we go. So yeah, we can, now that we have the pre-built prefab of the mana bottle, you can drop them wherever you want in the level. And that would make it pretty easy. One other thing that we could do, and maybe we'll do this now. What if you had smaller mana bottles and larger mana bottles? Well, that's pretty easy. We could actually just take, let's do this. The mana bottle itself, all of the cylinder and the sphere, those are our child objects to this. So if I make the mana bottle scaled bigger, let's make that instead of 0.7 and 0.5 and 0.7. Let's make that 1.4. Let's just double it. 1.4, 1, and 1.4. Now we have a super mana bottle, right? So that's pretty cool. We can make it bigger, but what's the point of having a super mana bottle? Well, it should have more mana, right? So if we go back over here, we can go to our mana bottle, and instead of saying, well, it should be 50, let's just make a public variable here. So let's public int, and I'm just going to call it mana. And I'm going to say that equals 50. So this is doing exactly the same thing that this was, but I'm just going to say plus mana. Save it. Okay, so that's doing exactly the same thing as before. But now when we go back over to Unity, if we look at this big mana bottle right here, it says 50 is what the script naturally gives that. But if we click in here, we can make it give us 100 mana. So now, if we look at the small bottles, they're worth 50. The big one can be worth 100. So you can actually have kind of a lot of fun doing various things. You could just as easily have this, instead of manipulating your mana amount, you could make health ones. You could make, I don't know. Once you have the idea that this thing is going to get to your player and manipulate something on the player, then you've essentially made a thing you can pick up, and you can have it adds things to your inventory. The sky's the limit. Your imagination is the only thing keeping you down right there. So that's some mana bottles. Next video, we're going to start on having an intro screen and win screen and being able to move back and forth between them. All right, guys, let's do this.